Okay, so I think I got it working. So, yeah, we can keep going. I'm on page 17. I finished the paragraph and I'm on the second or the first beginning paragraph that's starting on that page. So, it wasn't long after the winter snows melted that activities began in the yard below. While Grandma and Mrs. Reed did great quantities of sewing indoors, preparations of a different sort were going on outside. We dolls, looking down from our seat at the upstairs window, judged that it must be a very long way to California by the amount of activity we saw. One day, two enormous wagons were drawn into the yard. Box after box of food was stowed away in them by Milt Elliott and Bayless Williams, the two hired men who were going with us. Big, good-natured Eliza Williams, our cook, was Bayless's sister, and she was going too. Other men were going to help drive the oxen and take care of the cattle. They were all down in the yard below us, packing the wagons and shouting remarks at one another. Mr. Reed stood by, checking things off his long lists as they were hoisted into the wagon. Barrels of flour, cornmeal, and sugar, rice, beans, peas, crackers, dried fruit, preserves, honey, vinegar, salt, hams, beef, and smoked fish. We dolls had no idea that people required so much food. Then there were other lists for Patty's father to check. Tools of all sorts, axes, hatchets, sickles, to cut grass on long drives, I heard him say to Milt. Spades, saws, nails, whetstones, tacks, needles, pins, threads, scissors, wax, seal needles, twine, hammers, rope, chains, beeswax, and tallow melted together for greasing shoes, rosin and tallow for wheels, guns and bullet molds, and bars of lead to make the bullets. Oh dear, we recalled. That's in case of Indian attacks. From time to time, other men who, we gathered, were taking their families to California stopped by to see how the Reeds were coming along. You better plan to sell some of your horses and buy oxen, we heard Mr. Reed tell one of them. Horses are likely to stall in mud holes, you know, and oxen can live off the grass on the way. Packing feed for the horses will take up too much of your wagon space. Hadn't thought of it that way, the man said. Guess you're right, Mr. Reed. One morning, another stranger-looking wagon was drawn up in the yard. This must be the one we had heard the family refer to as the palace car. Mr. Reed was having it built especially comfortable for Grandma. It's to be our home on wheels, Patty told us. See, the door's on the side instead of at the end like the other wagons. And there are spring seats inside and a little iron stove to keep us warm. There's the stovepipe going up through the top with a piece of tin around it to keep the sparks from falling on the canvas wagon top. And just look, it has 2 stories. Isn't that funny? A wagon with an upstairs and beds. A regular traveling house. Bedding and cooking utensils and clothes and big canvas sacks were put into the palace car. The Reeds didn't take any trunks. They are useless weight, Patty's father said. But we dolls had our own little hair trunk, as Patty promised, and although it contained mainly the fashionable gowns of my sister dolls, I too had a few scraps tucked away in it, from which Patty had promised to make a new dress as we traveled. At last came the day for departure. It was the 14th of April, 1846, and I have heard Patty relate many times since then. The birds were singing in the lilac bushes outside our window, and spring flowers were blossoming in the yard for the big white house that we were leaving forever. Patty and Puss were dressed in their new linsey traveling suits, and I was safely cradled in Patty's pocket. Mr. Reed was dignified and handsome in black broadcloth, and Mrs. Reed was wearing her best paisley shawl and Sunday bonnet. The men led teams of oxen into the yard and yoked them to the wagons. Mr. Reed's mare Glaucus was pawing the ground, and Puss's pony Billy was prancing around as excited as his mistress. Relatives and neighbors were gathered to bid the Reeds goodbye. Here, Margaret, we heard one lady say to Mrs. Reed, I've brought you a looking-glass. Hang it where you can take a peep at yourself now and then, so you won't forget to keep your good looks. Patty's mother laughingly thanked her and hung it opposite the door in the palace car. A looking-glass is a mirror. Soon there was great barking of dogs. Sorry, I was printing something and it took forever, so then I gave up. And now it's deciding to work. So there's that. Anyways, I've lost my part. Soon there was a great barking of dogs and shouting as more wagons rolled up the road. Someone called out, Here are the Donners! Patty was arranging us in the palace car by this time, and several other little girls popped their heads in to see what was going on. "Oh, are you allowed to take all your dolls?" one of them asked Patty. "We could only take our best ones. We had to give the old ones away." I heard this remark with dismay. Dear me, I thought, is it possible Patty might have to leave me behind? But I was soon reassured as she answered, "We have plenty of room for everything, and I wouldn't give any of my dolls away for anything." Her little hand closed around me and made me feel warm and secure. Never had we been in the midst of so many laughing and chattering and crying people. All of Patty's and Puss's schoolmates were there to kiss them goodbye. "What luck, kids," one little boy remarked. "I wish my folks were going to California." Uncle James and Uncle Gershom still tried to persuade Grandma to change her mind and remain with them as they lifted her onto her feather bed in the palace car. But Grandma was as determined as ever to go a pioneering once again. At last the drivers, one by one, cracked their whips, and the oxen moved the wagon slowly out onto the road. Patty sat in Grandma's bed, holding up the wagon flap so we could all have one last look at our old home and the cheering, waving friends we were leaving behind. Through the streets of Springfield, Milt Elliott drove the palace car. "Milt," I heard Puss call as she rode by on Billy, "are you sure we can get the oxen to keep the wagon on that narrow bridge? Without reins, how can you make them go where you want them to go?" Milt laughed and called back, "Don't you worry, Puss. Billy and George are the best pair of lead oxen in the party. They know that whoa and ha and gee mean as well as I do." So that's kind of interesting. So when oxen in front of the wagon, they don't have reins. You know those when you ride a horse, you hold on to the straps and you can kind of pull them and steer the horse. The oxen don't have those. So Milt, who's in charge of steering them, he just gives them commands and that tells them what to do. So if he says, "Whoa," I'm assuming that's stop. Ha probably means go. I don't know what gee means, but I don't know. So anyways, that's kind of interesting, I thought. Several of the family dogs were going with us, and they pranced proudly alongside the wagons, paying not the least attention as curious Springfield dogs came up to bark and sniff as we rolled by. "Are you comfortable, Grandma?" asked Patty. "Fine, child, fine," answered the old lady, her eyes sparkling. I suppose she was remembering when she was Patty's age and starting out on that other trek down the wilderness road, the one she had told us of so often. Jamie and Tommy busied themselves inspecting the cupboards under the seats, pulling at the knobs and squatting down to peer into them inquisitively, and repeating 100 times, "What's this, Mommy? What's this?" "We won't travel far today, Mother," Mrs. Reed said to Grandma. "The men intend to set up camp just as they will when we get out on the plains. Besides, Jim and Gershom and some of the Donners' friends plan to ride out and camp with us for a farewell party tonight." Yes, they don't like the idea of their old mother a going pioneering at her age. But I'll be happier with you, dear, as long as I last. How many of us are there, daughter? 31, I believe Mr. Reed said. A good number for 3 families. The Donners are fine folks, quiet and sensible. They have some nice youngsters, too. Ours won't lack playmates. Mrs. George Donner plans to start a school in California. With 14 young ones in the party, it will be a lively crossing, I reckon, Grandma said. So that gives you an idea of how many people are with them. So they have 31 people, 14 are kids. I'm still going to read the next one, but I'm going to pause and upload this video and then do a third video for the next chapter. A couple questions I had. So there's this palace car. I know we've read that people don't normally ride in the wagons, but there they are riding in the wagons. So what's up with the palace car? And does that mean they're rich? That they can afford that? I don't know. Sounds like it to me. But I'd have to do some research. And also their first night, they're stopping really close to where they left. So they're not going very far. And they're going to have a big old party. And all their friends from town are going to come party with them. And then they're going to officially go the next day. So I wonder if that's something that people did a lot too. Anyways, I'm going to stop and upload this one. And then if you want, it would be a good time to go look up the questions for chapter 1 and answer those before we start chapter 2 in the next video.